Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff. The wind howling around you. Your feet inches from a crumbling ledge. One wrong step, one careless move, and you plummet, not because someone pushed you, but because you weren't paying attention. That's what some men do with their words. They don't need enemies to ruin their lives, they do it themselves. One reckless sentence at a time. Their phrases sound bold, confident, even wise in the moment. But beneath the surface, it's fear dressed up as strength. Laziness cloaked in bravado. Have you ever caught yourself saying something that felt tough but left a hollow sting in your chest? If so, this video is for you. We're diving deep into the 6 things stupid men say, phrases that quietly erode discipline, dignity, and respect. And we're not stopping there. We'll show you what a Stoic man says instead. Because your words aren't just noise, they're the blueprint of your soul. Buckle up, because this one's going to hit hard and leave you sharper. 1. That's just how I am, the silent killer of growth. Picture a man standing in the middle of a crowded room, shoulders squared, voice steady, declaring, "That's just how I am." It sounds like a power move, doesn't it? Like he's planting a flag in the ground, claiming his identity with unshakable conviction. But let's pull back the curtain. That phrase isn't strength, it's surrender. It's a man waving a white flag, not to truth or principle, but to stagnation. When a man says, "That's just how I am," he's not defending his character, he's locking himself in a cage and throwing away the key. Why? Because he's decided growth is optional, that questioning himself is weakness, and that staying the same is the same as staying strong. Spoiler: it's not. I once knew a man named Carl, a retired Navy officer with a presence that could silence a room. At 70, he was sharp as a tack, always in a crisp suit, his silver hair perfectly combed. But behind the polished exterior was a man frozen in time. His wife, Ellen, craved connection, a glimpse of the man beneath the armor. She'd ask for vulnerability, for a real conversation, and Carl would shut it down with, "I'm not built like that." His son, Mark, tried to bridge the gap, bringing up old wounds from a distant childhood. Carl's response? "That's not how I do things." Year after year, he stood his ground, immovable, convinced his stubbornness was strength. But it wasn't. It was ego wearing a lazy mask. Over time, Carl's world began to crumble, not with explosions or shouting matches, but with a quiet, suffocating decay. His wife didn't leave in a storm of anger, she just slipped away. Tired of waiting for a man who refused to evolve, his son stopped calling, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. Carl's life didn't collapse because of betrayal or bad luck, it fell apart because he chose to stay still while the world moved on. That's the danger of, "That's just how I am." It's not a declaration of strength, it's a prison sentence wrapped in counterfeit courage. The Stoics saw through this trap centuries ago. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." Those words cut deeper the older you get. Life doesn't care about your experience if you're not turning it into insight. A man who clings to, "That's just how I am," isn't wise, he's a statue of himself. Solid but lifeless, standing in a world that's forgotten him. Experience alone isn't enough, it's what you do with it that matters. Have you ever met someone who's lived decades but learned nothing? They're not rare, and they're not who you want to become. A Stoic man doesn't hide behind a fixed identity. He refines it. He listens, not because he's weak, but because he's wise enough to know every day is a chance to sharpen who he is. Discipline isn't about staying the same, it's about choosing progress over pride. When a man says, "That's just how I am," he's not just stopping his growth, he's starting his decay. It's a slow rot that seeps into his words, his mind, his relationships, until his life narrows into a routine so small it barely feels like living. So, what does a Stoic say instead? He says, "I'm working on it." It's not flashy, but it's honest. It's a promise to himself and the world that he's not done yet, that he's still in the forge, hammering away at his flaws, shaping himself into something better. Those 4 words carry more strength than any excuse ever could. They're a signal that he's alive, adaptable, and unafraid to face his own shortcomings. Because in the end, it's not about being perfect, it's about being willing to get better. Which kind of man are you choosing to be today? Stay tuned. Because we've got 5 more phrases to unpack. Each one a trap that could derail your life if you're not careful. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep sharpening together. A man's words shape his soul. Let's uncover the next trap. We just exposed how "that's just how I am" locks a man in a prison of his own making, chaining him to stagnation while the world moves on. But what happens when a man's words don't just freeze him, they hide him? Let's dive into the second phrase that stupid men say. One that masquerades as strength but buries them alive. Buckle up, because this one's going to sting. 2. Real men don't talk about feelings. The lie that buries you. Picture a man sitting alone in a dimly lit room. The weight of the world pressing on his chest. His jaw is clenched, his eyes fixed on the floor, and his heart is a storm he refuses to name. He's been told his whole life that real men don't talk about feelings, and he's bought into it. Wearing it like a badge of honor. It feels rugged, doesn't it? Like a shield forged in the fire of masculinity. But here's the truth. That shield isn't protecting him, it's suffocating him. According to the American Psychological Association, men who bottle up their emotions face higher risks of depression, heart disease, and even early death. Yet, this lie persists, passed down through generations like a cursed heirloom, whispered from father to son, etched into the minds of men who think silence equals strength. This phrase isn't about toughness, it's about fear. It's a man dodging the inner battle he's too scared to face. Pulling down the blinds and hoping the storm inside will just pass. But storms don't pass when you ignore them, they fester. Pain, confusion, and resentment build silently, rotting beneath the surface until they erupt as anger, addiction, or a cold, permanent disconnection from everyone he loves. Have you ever seen a man shut down when someone tries to get close? That's not strength, it's a man burying himself alive, brick by brick, with every feeling he refuses to acknowledge. I knew a guy named Tom, a construction worker with hands like iron and a laugh that could fill a room. On the outside, he was the picture of grit, always the first to crack a joke, never showing a crack in his armor. But those closest to him saw the truth. When his marriage hit rough waters, he didn't talk, he clammed up. Real men don't talk about that stuff, he'd say, brushing off his wife's pleas for openness. When stress from work gnawed at him, he drowned it in beer, never once admitting he was struggling. Over time, the silence grew louder than his laugh. His wife left, not because she stopped loving him, but because she couldn't reach him. His friends drifted away, tired of a man who wouldn't let them in. Tom didn't lose his life to a dramatic blowout, he lost it to the slow decay of a heart he refused to name. The Stoics would call this nonsense. People often misread Stoicism as emotional suppression, as if Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most powerful men, sat around numb to the world. That's not Stoicism, it's avoidance. Marcus wrote privately about his fears, his grief, his flaws, not to wallow, but to understand them. He didn't broadcast his struggles to the world, he faced them head on, dissecting them with ruthless clarity so they wouldn't control him. A Stoic man doesn't fear feeling, he fears being ruled by feelings he's too cowardly to name. Emotional maturity isn't about sobbing in public or pretending you're above it all. It's about sitting quietly with what's inside you, observing it without judgment, and choosing to respond from a place of calm, not chaos. Why does this matter? Because a man who refuses to talk about what he carries often carries the most damage. He thinks hiding his cracks makes him unbreakable, but those cracks are where wisdom slips through. To speak about what troubles you, not in weakness, but with steady, deliberate command, is a strength most men never discover. The man who buries his inner life isn't free, he's a prisoner to the chaos he won't face. And if you can't be honest with yourself, you're forcing everyone around you to live in the shadow of your silence. So, what does a Stoic say instead? He says, I feel this, and I'm working through it. It's not a performance, it's ownership. It's a quiet acknowledgement that feelings don't make you less of a man, they make you human. And a real man doesn't run from his humanity, he masters it. Stoicism doesn't demand silence, it demands honesty. You don't need to bare your soul to strangers, but you do need to stop pretending you don't have one. But we're not done yet. The next phrase is where things get uglier. where a man dodges accountability with 4 simple words that rot everything he could have claimed as his own. Let's talk about "it's not my fault" and why it's a poison that kills nobility. Stick around, because this one's a game changer. From silence to blame, the next phrase that traps a man. We just uncovered how real men don't talk about feelings buries a man under the weight of his own unacknowledged emotions, locking him in a prison of silence. But what happens when a man's words don't just hide his inner world, they strip him of his power? Let's dive into the third phrase that stupid men say. One that sounds like a defense but is really a surrender. This one's going to hit like a wake-up call. So stay with me. 3. It's not my fault. The poison of blame. Imagine a man standing in the wreckage of his life, pointing at everything but himself, the economy, his boss, his ex, his childhood, even fate itself. It's not my fault, he says, his voice sharp with conviction, as if those 4 words could rebuild what's broken. On the surface, it sounds like he's standing his ground, defending his innocence, but peel back the layers, and it's something else entirely, an admission of defeat. This is the language of a man who's handed over the reins of his life, who believes the world just happens to him, that he's always the victim, never the cause, never the solution. It's a mindset that doesn't just chip away at his dignity, it sterilizes his entire existence, leaving him powerless in a story he refuses to write. The Stoics saw this kind of thinking as the first step toward moral decay. Epictetus, one of their sharpest minds, wrote, "It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them." Think about that for a second. Your circumstances, whether it's a job loss, a broken relationship, or a missed opportunity, aren't the real enemy. It's how you interpret them that gives them power. And no interpretation is more destructive than the belief that responsibility always belongs to someone else. When a man points the finger at everything around him, he's not explaining his pain, he's giving away his power. Worse, he's deafening himself to the one voice that could change it all, his own. I knew a man named James, a middle-aged mechanic with a quick wit and a knack for fixing anything with an engine. But when it came to his life, he was stuck in neutral. His business was failing, his marriage was crumbling, and his kids barely spoke to him. Ask him why, and he'd rattle off a list of culprits. The economy was trash. His customers were cheap. His wife didn't understand him. "It's not my fault," he'd say, almost reflexively, as if those words could shield him from the mess. But they didn't. They just kept him trapped, circling the same problems year after year, waiting for someone else to fix what he wouldn't face. Over time, his shop closed, his wife moved out, and his kids stopped trying. James didn't lose because the world was unfair, he lost because he refused to take the wheel. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A man who clings to, "it's not my fault," isn't stoic, he's shackled. Blame is the easy way out, a reflex for those too lazy to reflect. But responsibility? That's different. It's a structure, a discipline. It demands you stop waiting for apologies, stop hoping the world will change, and start asking one brutal question: what can I control? The answer is always the same: your reaction, your direction, your discipline. Older men, especially those carrying scars from years of hardship, financial, emotional, spiritual, know pain that wasn't always their fault, but dragging that pain into the future like a free pass to stagnate? That's not wisdom. It's cowardice with a long memory. The Stoics didn't deny injustice. They knew life could be brutal, unfair, raw, but they refused to let it define them. Seneca said it best: "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Life will grind you down, but blaming the friction doesn't make you stronger. Enduring it with grace and adapting does. So, the next time something falls apart and "it's not my fault" rises in your throat, catch it, hold it, replace it, say, "It's now my responsibility." That shift, that subtle moment of ownership, is the difference between a man who stays bitter and one who becomes better. It's the spark that turns a victim into a victor. But we're not stopping here. The next phrase takes us deeper, into a mindset so common it's practically woven into our culture. It's the voice of mediocrity dressed up as confidence. The sound of a man who believes he deserves the world without lifting a finger to earn it. Let's talk about I deserve better, and why it's a trap that breeds resentment. Keep watching. This one's going to challenge you. From blame to entitlement, the next trap awaits. We just exposed how it's not my fault strips a man of his power, leaving him a passenger in his own life, pointing fingers while the world passes him by. But what happens when a man's words don't just dodge responsibility, they demand rewards he hasn't earned? Let's dive into the fourth phrase that stupid men say. One that sounds like self-respect but reeks of quiet arrogance. This one's going to hit close to home. So let's get to it. 4. I deserve better. The mirage of entitlement. Picture a man standing in the middle of his life, arms crossed, staring at the world with a scowl. I deserve better, he mutters, his voice thick with conviction, as if the universe owes him a promotion, a better relationship, a brighter spotlight. It sounds like a cry for justice, doesn't it? Like he's claiming his worth in a world that's overlooked him. But here's the cold truth. More often than not, I deserve better is a mask for resentment and laziness. A phrase that betrays a man who's doing less than he thinks and expecting more than he's earned. It's not self-respect, it's entitlement. A hunger that consumes humility and trades craftsmanship for complaints. The Stoics saw through this trap like glass. They didn't care what life had denied you. They cared what you were doing right now to align with virtue. Epictetus said it best. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That's the opposite of entitlement, it's embodiment. A man who constantly whines, I deserve better, isn't growing, he's just dissatisfied, mistaking his frustration for progress. But dissatisfaction without discipline? That's a one-way ticket to bitterness. True growth demands discomfort, responsibility, and restraint. It's not about shouting what you're owed, it's about quietly building what you admire. No matter what the world hands you. I knew a man named Derek, a mid-level manager in his late 50s, who carried himself like he was destined for greatness. He'd talk endlessly about how his company didn't see his potential, how his colleagues got promotions he deserved, how life hadn't given him the breaks he was due. But behind the complaints was a different story. Derek coasted. He showed up, did his job, and went home, never staying late, never taking on extra, never sharpening his skills. He spent more time announcing his value than developing it, waiting for the world to hand him a throne he hadn't built. Over time, his career stalled, his relationships faded, and his resentment grew heavier. Derek didn't lose because life was unfair, he lost because he bet on entitlement instead of effort. Seneca warned, it is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. And what's a bigger waste than demanding rewards for work you never did? A Stoic doesn't walk through life with a ledger of what he's owed. He walks with discipline, with quiet resolve, ready to do the hard things without expecting the world to applaud. He doesn't say, I want what's mine. He says, I will be what I admire, no matter what I receive. That's the mindset that cuts through the fog of entitlement, especially for men in their later years. When careers plateau or recognition fades, the temptation to lean on, I deserve better, grows stronger. But here's the reality. If you're spending more energy proclaiming your worth than proving it, you've already lost the plot. The Stoic asks, am I still sharpening? That question keeps him tethered to the process, not the prize. So, the next time you feel the world's cheated you, pause. Don't say, I deserve better. Ask, what am I building today? Because a man of depth, of Stoic character, doesn't demand rewards, he creates them through action, not words. But the journey gets tougher. The next phrase reveals a man who's not just entitled, he's retreated, hiding behind a line that sounds like boundaries but feels like surrender. Let's talk about, that's not my job, and why it shrinks a man's presence to nothing. Stay with me. This one's a gut check. 5. That's not my job. The retreat from responsibility. Imagine a man sitting at his kitchen table, the same chair he's claimed for decades, his face set in a stubborn frown. That's not my job, he says, waving off a request to help with the dishes, to talk through his teenager's struggles, to step up in a way that isn't written in his mental checklist. It sounds like he's setting boundaries, doesn't it? Like he's protecting his time, his role, his pride. But let's be real. "That's not my job," isn't about balance. It's avoidance dressed up as maturity. It's the phrase of a man who's quietly stopped leading, who wants the respect of being reliable without the work of being truly present. I knew a man named Ray, a machinist from Pittsburgh who'd clocked 30 years on the factory line without missing a single shift. Every morning at 5 a.m., he was there, tools in hand, steady as a rock. But at home, Ray lived by a different code. Not my job. The dishes piling up in the sink? Not his job. Guiding his teenage son through tough school decisions? Not his job. Sitting down with his wife to talk through the emotional distance growing between them? Definitely not his job. Ray paid the bills, brought home a paycheck, and called it dependability. But when his wife left after 28 years, he sat in that same kitchen chair, stunned, saying, "I did everything I was supposed to do." Except he didn't. He did the bare minimum, never asking what needed to be done, only what was assigned. And that's not leadership, it's a slow, silent retreat. The Stoics would shake their heads at this. They didn't live by duty alone, they lived by purpose. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is your vocation? To be a good man. Not a man who hides behind job descriptions, but one who sees a gap and fills it, no matter how small or unglamorous." Stoic strength isn't about sticking to a checklist, it's about showing up. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when no one's watching, even when no one's keeping score. A man who says, "That's not my job," shrinks his presence until all that's left is obligation and routine. He trades usefulness for comfort, tying his value to the bare minimum and nothing more. So, what does a Stoic say instead? He says, "I'll handle it." It's not about taking on the world, it's about stepping into the gap. No matter how small, because that's where character is built. Keep watching, because we've got one more phrase to unpack. And it's a doozy. From retreat to resignation, the final trap awaits. We just uncovered how "that's not my job" shrinks a man's presence, turning him into someone who avoids responsibility while calling it balance. But what happens when a man's words don't just limit his actions, they numb his very spirit? Let's dive into the sixth and final phrase that stupid men say. One that sounds calm and wise but quietly rots ambition from the inside out. This one's a silent killer. So let's expose it. 6. It is what it is, the surrender of the soul. Imagine a man sitting on a weathered porch, staring at the horizon as the sun sets on another day of missed opportunities. His shoulders slump, his eyes are distant, and with a tired shrug, he mutters, "It is what it is." It sounds almost serene, doesn't it? Like he's reached some zen-like acceptance of life's chaos. But don't be fooled. Those 5 words aren't wisdom, they're a death sentence for his drive, his purpose, his soul. Behavioral science backs this up. One of the first signs of learned helplessness in adults is verbal resignation. The moment someone stops believing their actions can shape their reality. And no phrase screams resignation louder than, "It is what it is." For many men, especially those worn down by years of setbacks, failed ventures, broken relationships, fading dreams, this phrase becomes a reflex. It's not acceptance, it's surrender dressed up as philosophy. Picture a boxer in the ring, bloodied but still standing, who drops his gloves and walks away. Not because he's at peace, but because he's too tired to fight. That's what this phrase does. It numbs ambition, dulls conviction, and leaves a man watching his life like a stranger, detached and fading into the background. Have you ever caught yourself saying this? Shrugging off a problem instead of facing it? It feels harmless in the moment, but it's a slow poison. I knew a man named Paul, a former salesman in his 60s who once lit up a room with his charm. Life hadn't been kind to him. 2 divorces, a business that tanked, a body that wasn't what it used to be. Over time, Paul stopped fighting. When his daughter asked him to reconnect, he'd sigh, "It is what it is." When his health started slipping, he'd shrug, "It is what it is." It wasn't stoicism, it was apathy. A man giving up on his own story. His world grew smaller, not because life was cruel, but because he stopped shaping it. Friends stopped calling, his daughter stopped trying, and Paul became a shadow of the man he once was. Not because he lacked potential, but because he chose passivity over purpose. The Stoics would call this a betrayal of their principles. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's not a call to shrug and give up, it's a call to act within your control. The Stoics taught acceptance of what you can't change, but they never meant for you to forfeit what you can. Seneca sharpened the point. It is not that we have a short life, but we make it short by wasting it. And what's a bigger waste than numbing your sense of purpose with a phrase that disguises apathy as maturity? When a man leans on, it is what it is. He's not enduring, he's retreating. That mindset spreads like a quiet plague, seeping into his relationships, his ambitions, his health, until he's no longer a participant in his own life, just a spectator. There's a razor-thin line between composure and capitulation. Stoic composure says, I see this for what it is, and I'll act within my power. Capitulation says, I see this, and I'm done. One sharpens you, the other sedates you. A Stoic doesn't mutter, it is what it is. When life hits hard, when people fail you, when the world refuses to bend, he examines, he accepts, and then he responds with precision, not passivity. Life will bruise you, no question, but that's not a free pass to check out. So, the next time those words bubble up, pause, ask yourself, is this true Stoic acceptance? Or am I just too tired to care? Because every time you choose passivity, you fade a little more. One day, you might wake up not respected, not feared, not loved, just unnoticed. And for a man capable of so much more, that's the cruelest fate of all. So, what does a Stoic say instead? He says, I'll make it what I can. It's not about defying reality, it's about owning your response to it. It's a quiet vow to act, to fight, to shape what's in your control, no matter how small. That's where strength lives. Closing the loop. What will you say next? We've unpacked 6 phrases that chip away at a man's power, each one a trap disguised as strength. From, that's just how I am, to, it is what it is. These words don't just reveal weakness, they create it. But now you know better. The question is, what will you say instead? A Stoic man doesn't leave a trail of excuses or apathy. He leaves a legacy of discipline, honesty, and action. So, start today. Replace these phrases with words that sharpen your soul, not sell it off. Hit that subscribe button, and let's keep building a life worth living, one word at a time.